Welcome to the Pooch Parenting Podcast, a podcast for parents with dogs. I'm Michelle Stern, a certified professional dog trainer, mom, and former teacher. Living with kids and dogs at the same time can feel like a circus. I know because I lived it too. Join us as we interview a variety of experts and parents to discuss topics that will make parenting with dogs easier, safer, and less chaotic. Also, you can love living with your dog again. I'll always keep it real, which might even mean that you hear the messiness of life in the background on occasion, but at least you know you're not alone. Hi, Michael. I'm so glad that you're here talking with us today.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about some pretty tough stuff. We're going to talk a lot about the word aggression and what does it mean? Are dogs actually aggressive, and sort of the concept that there is a range in behavior that we see in all dogs. And I want to sort of pick apart a little bit about what is within the normal range and what should families really start to worry about. And then later on, we'll talk about how you make some hard choices about what to do about it when that happens. But before we dive in, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Michael Baugh. You mentioned that, and I work, primarily with families whose dogs have had some sort of aggressive behavior, or on the flip side, dogs who behave timidly or fearfully. Sort of the dog that we don't see come out from under the sofa, for instance. When a guest is over. So I have a great deal of respect for various trainers who teach tricks or teach for film and television or teach agility or flyball. That's not what I do or the other trainers in my group do. We do dogs who behave offensively, and that's our sport.
Yes.
So that's the work that we primarily do. And I work out of Houston, but we also see clients in this particular age, especially. We do online video consultations. We've had clients in suburban Washington, D.C., Washington State, California, rural Missouri. So all points in between.
Okay, that's really good. I like that you mentioned the different types of dog trainers that are out there, because I am a certified professional dog trainer, but I love the behavior aspect. And so what you focus on speaks to my heart of helping dogs feel differently than they currently feel. And with dogs who are demonstrating aggressive behaviors, there's a lot of feelings going on. So why don't we start there? Why do dogs do these kinds of things that people perceive as aggressive? What is that even coming from in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there's a there's a fair amount to unpack there,
Okay.
right? Um, the if you're looking for kind of like a textbook definition, and I like this definition, of aggressive behavior. And aggressive behavior is um, behavior that does harm or intends to threaten harm in order to make something else in the environment go away, like get further away from me, or to make something in the environment stop, right? So if somebody ran a red light in front of you, you would slam on your brakes and honk on the horn. Maybe not we may not call that an aggressive behavior, but it is a behavior in order to make that thing stop or swerve away from me. If somebody, is standing in a checkout line, a little bit, closer than 6 feet, and they got their mask hanging down, showing their nose, you might give them a little look. That could also be considered a behavior intended on making them move further away, or have some awareness. So that's really what it's about with our dogs. So, if there's a dog that you approach and it kind of looks at you and it gets a kind of a glassy look in its eye and maybe shows its teeth, um, we might say, "Oh my, that's an aggressive behavior." And in fact, we might look a little bit deeper and say, "Well, what's the function? What's that dog trying to communicate to me? What kind of effect on the environment is that dog, even subconsciously trying to throw out there?" Which is basically like, "Hey, dude, stop."
Mm-hmm.
Don't come closer, or
Right.
would you please go away? So that's kind of, there's different ways to teach that to clients, but that's kind of, I like to go there. I like to help. I like to teach people that this behavior, although unwanted, is within the bell curve. It's not abnormal. This is how our dogs, communicate with us.
Mm-hmm. I like that you talked about that being a communication, because I feel that dogs do the best they can to let us know how they are feeling, as my puppy is doing in the background at the moment.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
But the idea that they will warn us, and that what we call aggressive behavior typically doesn't come out of nowhere. So you
Yeah.
probably hear this a lot, and I know that I hear it a lot because I deal with families with kids, is they say things like the dog bit the child out of nowhere. And what I think that communicates to me is that there were some warning signals that were missed between the moment when the dog started to feel uncomfortable and when the bite happened. So perhaps the dog moved its body in a way where, like you said before, it looks away, or it stares, or it lifts its lip, or it growls. And those are all really important steps along this ladder of amping up before the bite happens, right? So it may feel like it's coming from out of nowhere, but it's really because people don't know what they don't know, and they're missing the warning signs. So the warning signs we should celebrate, right? Because
Yeah.
that prevents something dangerous from happening. Is that so?
Yeah. I mean, Michelle, I think you've got it absolutely right. And if we're lucky enough to get those warning signs, yes, we should celebrate. Those can be points of entry for us. But here's the deal. You mentioned dogs, living in a household with children, um, or babies or toddlers, any number of those developmental stages. First of all, the dog may not give protracted warning signals, right? So, if you and I are working with a couple who just had a baby who started to move or
Mhm.
sit up or scoot, well, number one, that couple, if it's their first child, it's their first go at it as well. But the other thing is that maybe they've lived with Charlie the Terrier for 4.5 years, and Charlie the Terrier has been a joy and never had a problem and never shown any kind of those signals. Well, guess what? Charlie's in a brand new world,
Mhm.
right? So everything's different. So we're just getting the first sort of read on how Charlie deals with those situations, and he may not deal with it by giving us what we call protracted, drawn out, sort of like, and now I'm going to give you a dirty look, and now I'm going to show you my teeth, and now I'm going to growl at you. No, no, no. I mean, Charlie may give a couple of quick ones and then say, you know what, little one, get out of here, and give him a little pop or something. And I think the main takeaway from this is that behavior, aggressive behavior, but any kind of behavior, but let's just say aggressive behavior, it's not like some demon that lives inside the dog and then all of a sudden it comes out. Behavior is an interaction with the environment. It's a conversation with what's happening in the world around them. And so if Charlie the Terrier has never had a conversation with a room with a baby or a toddler in it, this is the first go. And so your client could say, my dog has been sweet and has never been aggressive for his entire life. And it can very much look like this came out of nowhere, right? Because this is the first conversation that dog has had with this particular situation. So my heart goes out to clients who say this came out of the blue. And I get excited to share with them and teach them, what we just discussed right now, which is, yeah, and this is a situation that we've never dealt with before, so it's new to you and it's new to the dog. And yes, there may have been warnings, but they were probably too quick for you to catch, you know, Or yes, the dog may have given sort of these ritualized aggression, the equivalent of the dirty look in the grocery
Yeah.
store, but we missed them.
Hmm.
Um, and yes, this is a two species process. We're working with your dog and we're working with you, and there is no shame. You are not a bad person for having missed these signals,
Yes.
especially the ones that came really quick,
Yes.
like little micro, um, like, come on, like, if I see my dog's little whiskers kind of pull forward in a little micro expression or something,
Uh-huh.
like, I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't expect my nephew, my adult. To see that,
Totally. Yes.
yeah.
That
So
I'm glad you said that, because I think there's parents have a lot of guilt that they miss things and that they saw the dog bite the child, and they feel so bad about that.
you
But
had me at parents have a lot of guilt, right? Period. Like,
I
forget
know.
the
And so it makes it a million times worse. And yet, like you just said, some of these reactions that the dog might give were subtle and so quick that even if you're not facing the exact right direction, you could miss them. So it's so easy to have an accident happen. It really is. It is very easy to have this happen. So let's say it does happen. Okay. Hopefully it's nothing super bad. Maybe the dog did what we call a muzzle punch, where it pokes the child with its
Sure.
nose or its teeth, or maybe it was a nip and not a dangerous bite. And the family is thinking, okay, what do we do next? How do we work through this? Is it something that we now need to be terrified for the rest of everyone's lives? Is this something we can work through? So let's assume this was not a really dangerous incident, but we all consider it an eye opener. I'm going to take off my rose colored glasses and realize that everybody has feelings and the dog will express him or herself. What do we do? Like, what should a parent who is feeling totally overwhelmed or scared do next?
Well, we're trainers. So the answer is always going to be like, well, let's address this from a trainer's point of view, and work with the elements that we have that we can work with. And so I'll go down that path, if you want to. But I think, and I will, I'd be happy to, but I think in the moment, you know, when in that moment where our sort of like Disneyfied
Hmm.
a Disneyfied impression of what we thought life was going to be like with our dog, who we had before our child and we love, what that relationship between a dog and our child was going to look like. We had this image in our brain, like, oh my gosh, we have this dog who we just think is adorable, who is our first sort of surrogate child,
Yeah.
and now we're gonna bring our real child, into the world. And honey, isn't it gonna be wonderful? We're gonna have a baby and a dog and a fireplace and a new
They'll be best
house,
friends. Yeah.
and it's gonna be wonderful, right? So the moment that that gets cracked or shattered, um, you know, if I was going to give one piece of advice, it would be, um, um, first of all, move the child away from the dog. But that's kind of obvious, right? But
Yeah.
but I mean, after that, is don't panic. Like, take immediate action. Make sure that your dog and your child are safe. And I would say keep them separate for a period of time until we can definitely catch our breath, and then we get somebody in to help us. Um, but I don't know that it's cause for, like, I must, um, I must panic, and that's what we do as humans, and what I would imagine, um, parents sometimes do, is that I need to make an immediate decision about how this is going to play out for the rest of our lives
Yes.
right now.
Yes. I
Um,
see that a lot.
yeah. Um, you know, what do we do from a training perspective? So again, safety first. So in the moment, um, for a period of time, we keep the two living beings in our home separate so everyone can cool down.
Mhm.
Um, and if we, are able to identify, and this is what trainers do. We look at we look at a couple of key factors. It's sometimes hard to remember in hindsight, but what happened right before the dog bit the child? What was going on in the room? Where was the dog? Where was the child? Where on the child's body did the dog make contact? Was it on a hand, on an arm, on a face, on a head? I see a fair amount of like right here,
Mm-hmm.
which I can imagine, probably hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what was the setup? All right, and 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 then can we avoid that setup? Like, can we not? It's like, oh, it hurts, doctor, when I do this. Okay, well then don't do that anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Can we make that not happen? Um, and and then we start looking, like, can I bring a trainer in? Could I bring a behavior consultant in who is um, qualified and able to help with these particular issues, and start working on a plan.
A lot of people protest when I talk about management, and they say, well, I don't always want them to live apart. They can't always be separated. They can't always have a gate in between them, or it's not convenient. And there's a story we tell ourselves about, like you said before, about this Disney image of what we wish we had. And what we wish we had is that our dogs and kids are best friends and everybody is happy and safe. But in the meantime, we have to take actionable steps to make sure that that will happen down the road when they both learn to trust each other again. So barrier gates, changing the scenario of our life in the beginning is really going to be important. But then we do have to do a little bit of training in there to feel more confident.
I love getting together with trainers, over a cup of coffee or a bottle of wine. We could have scheduled this later in the day so we could all have a glass of wine when we chat.
We'll
But
do it again.
right, but I always sort of, my ears sort of prick when I hear anybody, and you didn't, this wasn't you didn't say this, but my ears always prick a little bit when I hear people sort of discuss managing the environment or managing the behavior as if it's just something that we do in the short term, like a band-aid.
Uh-huh.
Because what I teach my clients and what I found, over the past, 22 years, and what I found with my own dogs is that managing behavior is part of the behavior change process. It is not just oh, all we did is management. Okay, it's part of the process. Um, you know, my if we had workmen coming to the house today, for instance, um, my dogs would be up here in the office with me,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be quiet the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, over a couple glasses of wine, we could argue, well, that's just behavior management. And I'm like, well, no, it's my solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the long-term solution to the problem. I love having my dogs up here with me. I don't want them downstairs barking or getting underfoot or doing anything with the workers. So,
Right.
and um, the more um, the more our dogs are able to rehearse a behavior. In other words, the more they practice a behavior, the better they're going to get at it, the more likely the behavior is to recur again, and the stronger perhaps even the behavior is going to become. So when I give that little speech, sometimes people think, well, like, yeah, I mean, if we practice coming when called, that's going to get really good and they're going to get really strong at it. And if I practice asking them to lay down on their bed, that's going to get really strong and they get really good at it. And if they practice biting your kid or chasing him and nipping at his heels when
Yeah.
he's old enough to start running around, they're going to get good at that too.
Right.
But if they're in another room behind the baby gate with the chew toy or hanging out with their doggy buddy or cuddling with the cat or whatever, when the house is at the peak of its craziness, then they're not getting good at that behavior. They're not getting good at harassing the kids, and they're not under that level of stress. So I don't know. I just think management is just so very, very, not just important, but it's also really, really good training. It's a good, valuable part of the training process. And I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, but if I had to choose between I'm going to keep my dog behind a baby gate or I'm going to have my dog go live with someone else,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to keep my dog,
Right.
and they're going to be behind the gate, and we'll work that out.
Right.
Um, and there's probably other things that we can do. The other thing is that your toddler is not going to be a toddler forever.
Yeah.
Your toddler is going to grow up, and your
Right.
dog is still going to be around. And every developmental stage that your child goes through is like a brand new entity for your dog anyway.
Yes.
So anyway,
No, I love that you said that because it reinforces a lot of what I do with clients in terms of using management as a lifestyle strategy, really. I
yeah,
mean, we don't want our dogs to practice running out the front door when we open it for a delivery, right? And so we can set up barriers to prevent them from practicing those behaviors. We can put a leash, on the dog when grandpa comes over so the dog doesn't knock over your aging parent or whatever. There's a lot of these kinds of things that are management, but they solve a problem and allow a dog to practice being good and doing the right sets of behaviors. So let's move from here a little bit. And I would love to talk about some hard choices. So you
mhm,
talked about panic, and there is a lot of panic. I get calls from people who are crying, calls from people who, I got one the other day. In fact, someone in hysterics saying, "Do I have to put my dog to sleep because she bit my daughter?" And I said, "No, your dog doesn't have to die for making a mistake. Let's talk about the circumstances. Why did your dog bite your toddler? And what could we do to prevent that interaction from happening so that your dog felt that it needed to bite your toddler?" Um, so there are dogs that aren't wired right. It doesn't happen that often, but there are dogs that don't use gentle corrections to children, that are more assertive, that maybe bite and shake or don't let go or go kind of beyond what you and I would consider maybe the normal range of puppy, teething or whatever.
mhm.
So can we just talk a little bit about this? That
Yeah,
how does a family know what is manageable? Because I have to say that as much as I love management, which I use at my own house everywhere, even though I don't have little kids anymore, I have an old dog and a young dog. So I need to manage things. Um, Management sometimes fails, especially if there's kids in the house who forget to latch a gate. So maybe you have a baby gate, but somebody just doesn't make sure it clicks closed, or maybe somebody forgets to close a door or whatever, and an accident could happen. So how do we gauge the seriousness of this and whether or not we need to evaluate if this is the right dog for your family? I know this
yeah,
is a giant question. I know
yeah.
this.
It is.
So
It is a big question.
it's
And well, let me just say this first. So, on the off chance that we're reaching, that one couple or the handful of people who, um, are able to hear this part of it, that and not that it's about me, like you don't need to make me feel good, but I will share with you, like it is a gift to my week, to my day, when somebody calls and says, um, "We're having a baby, and it's due in 7 months."
me
and
too.
and 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 we've had and we want to get ready as a family and include our dog in that, and or our dog has had some issues that we indicate that we thinking indicate to us that there might be some problems. Can you help us with this? And then we can start doing evaluation ahead of time,
Mhm.
and that's a gift to us, of course, but it's really a gift to yourself. If you can, if you have that awareness, reach out, as soon as you're comfortable and ready to do that. I know parents are taking a lot of classes and they're getting ready for this change in their lives in a lot of different ways. This should be one of the ways that they're thinking about getting the family ready,
I
and their dogs included. So you know, as a as a as a practice as a practitioner, a behavior consultant that handles cases day in and day out where dogs have behaved in threatening or dangerous ways. There are a number of factors that I look at. Um, the three that come immediately to mind are, if there has been an incident, are, what was the severity of the actual incident? How significant was the bite, if there was a bite? On what part of the body did it occur? On the victim, the human who was bitten. Um, and how many bites were there? In most cases, thankfully there's only the one, and then that people call in. However, there may have been bites against other people prior, not just the one with the child or the baby or the toddler. Um, and then we look at what was the environmental setup. We talked about that briefly, like what was happening when that happened before, and can we identify other situations that might have been similar, that you noticed maybe other things in your dog that made you think like, oh, yeah, he's not really comfortable when X or Y is occurring. So for instance, some dogs get very uncomfortable if you're, like right, in their face, or making, direct eye contact with them. Not all dogs, some dogs. Some dogs have sensitivities and sort of flinch away, or maybe they've growled in the past when people, reach for them. Maybe their ears are sensitive. There's a number of sort of what we refer to as usual suspects, certain things that are typical triggers for dogs, sort of across the board. And then the third thing we look at is, so the first thing is the intensity of the bite. The third thing is like, can we identify triggers? Like your dog is not, in most cases, your dog is not seeking out your child,
Mm-hmm.
running after him. Oh, I'm going to go find little Teddy and I'm going to bite him.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
usually some sort of identifiable, trigger. So, as a behavior consultant, we look at the bite intensity. The second one we look at is the triggers. Can we identify what sets this dog off? If we can, we're in fairly good shape. If they're fuzzy or there's just a bunch of stuff that sets that dog off, then we're not as in good shape. And then the third factor is the human factor. How much mental real estate do they have to take on an issue like this? New parents do not have a lot of time to train their dogs. It's just a fact, right?
Yeah.
Got a lot of stuff going on, trying to figure out this whole mom and dad thing, and now I need to become sort of like a part-time dog trainer on top of it all, um,
Yes.
doable, doable, but can be challenging, right? So if we have just as an example, if we had really bad hard bite, had to get stitches, going to get plastic surgery, probably still going to have a scar into adulthood, you know, yikes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if the triggers are sort of like, I don't know, man, I mean, he just seems on edge every time the kid's in the room,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, yikes. Um, and by the way, I don't have any time or attention to this, and my husband never really liked the dog anyway.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Those set us up for a really crummy prognosis. And there's other factors that we look at in terms of prognosis as well, but those are the big three that come to mind for me.
Okay.
If I may, on the flip side, so if it's the first time that my son pulled himself up on the sofa and the dog was right there and the dog growled and snarled, I snatched my son away, and then I thought that was all it was and it was okay, and then he did it again, and then he just kind of got him on the cheek, and it kind of left a red mark, and there was some spit there. I don't know, maybe a little mark where I saw his tooth hit, you know, and that's the only time I've ever seen that happen. Otherwise, my dog is really pretty chill, um, and I'm all in. Then your prognosis is going to be a little bit better.
Right.
We're going to be in better shape to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that you said that. I like that you differentiated the families who feel that they have the bandwidth and the capacity to cope with the situation versus the ones that need to just have the honesty to say, I am so tired. I'm so tired. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know that I can do this. Because I think that at the end of the day, the ultimate success that the family has is based on what capacity they even have to make progress. Right. So I really like that you made those two differentiations. There are people that will say, my dog was my first baby. I am keeping this dog. I'm going to make this work. I love that, and I also highly respect the people who say, I don't know if I can do this, because they're not setting themselves up to fail. And I just want to highlight that takes guts, and it takes, I don't know, a lot of gumption to say, you know what, I have to take care of myself because that's the only way that I can parent and raise my family. And that's not a failure,
Yeah.
So I do think it's worth noting, because there is a lot of, we talked about guilt earlier. There's a lot of people who feel that they can't forgive themselves if they rehome the dog or whatever, that they failed. And I don't necessarily think of it as a failure. If the dog is really uncomfortable around your children, then there's a very good chance your dog could live a really happy life in a family that didn't have any, and that you're not failing your dog
Sure.
by moving your dog to a better
Sure.
environment.
Yeah. 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 We kind of stumbled into my bias a little bit there, and I don't disagree with anything you said. My bias tends to be, um, I'll try to lay out information as objective a way as I can, um, but I actually don't make decisions for my clients. It's
Mm-hmm.
always it's always your decision, and it may be a decision between crappy option one, crappy option B, and crappy option C.
Yeah.
You know, um, and uh, and I have had, thankfully, in 22 years, I can still remember all of the behavior euthanasia decisions that my clients have made, and I make myself available, of course, um, to hear them out as they make that decision. But I've also been very clear to never, because you can't, right, make the decision for them.
Right.
Um, and but I will tell you this, I like that you mentioned, the dog might be happier and live a better life in another home. That's absolutely true. Um, I'll tell you what my bias is. I recommend that folks, as a first option, look to their family and friends. I I I had a client, literally, I only saw this client once. It was just so crystal clear. Um, it was a little dog. It was a newborn baby. The newborn baby had only been home a couple of days, and the dog just made it very obvious that he did not like the idea of there being a newborn baby in the house. Like, he would jump up on the sofa and like bark at the parent holding the baby,
Oh,
at the baby though.
yeah.
And they had a very fortunate situation in that mom and dad lived in the same city, and the dog just went to go live with mom and dad, so they
Mm-hmm.
could still visit their dog, and
Right.
um, and that was the decision that they made. There have been other cases not involving children, one involving a child, but there have been other cases, most of them not involving children, um, where the family did decide to euthanize. And that is, when I have conversations with clients about that, there's a couple different ways that it goes. If if they're just putting it out on the table and they're saying that they've thought about it but they don't really want to do it, and what do I think, then I will help them explore other options,
Mm-hmm.
while they're exploring that option. Um, again, I keep saying my bias, my bias, my bias. Um, when at all possible, my bias is to keep the dog in the home where they currently are, if that's possible. Um, Especially when we're talking about euthanasia, because euthanasia is final. Like, there
I
is
know.
no undoing that. Okay. Um, and and so that's one option. So we look at all the options, and then if they've already made the decision, and whether I agree with it or not, if they've already made the decision, it is my job to um, support my fellow human being. Um, if you've made a decision that is so um, has such weight to it, um, I just trust that my client has already gone through the options and made what they think is the right decision for their own family. And there is no value at all in my trying to mansplain them out of it. There's just not. And
Right.
so why would I add additional pain to an already painful situation by, by playing devil's advocate,
Right.
Um, it just doesn't seem it just doesn't seem like a kind option. And honestly, in all of the cases that have ended with euthanasia, um, I have not had, serious disagreement about really any of them. Um, you know, one of them one of them was like, I literally showed up at an appointment for a second meeting with my client. There were no children in the household. I rang the doorbell. The woman answered the door. She was bleeding and crying,
Oh,
and her dog was barricaded behind a door.
oh, that's
And her husband
horrible.
and her husband was on the way home. Like she had literally had to take a nightstand and like block the dog and crawl out of the room and shut the door.
That's a horrible way to live.
It was horrible. Yeah, it was terrible. And her husband was on the way home, and I drove the client to the urgent care, and her husband took the dog to the veterinarian. Like that was a very clear one, right?
That's
Uh,
very
most of them, most of them are not. Most of them are not so, not so clear.
right.
Most of them are very lots and lots of subtle shades, in between.
I agree.
Um, yeah. So,
I agree.
um,
The only time that it's really come up for me in a conversation with a client is when we feel that the dog is a ticking time bomb, that something is going to happen. And if rehoming the dog means that that bomb will go off just somewhere else, then you're not fixing the problem. You're just forcing someone else to deal with it instead of you. And I don't think that that's necessarily a responsible thing to do. Um, but that said, it needs to be a pretty significant circumstance for that still to be on the table. And most parents aren't in that circumstance. Most parents are faced with things that are uncomfortable and that scare them, but with the guidance of a very compassionate trainer like you, or I do consider myself to be really compassionate as well, that we can help them get through each day with
mhm.
more confidence and less fear, so that they don't feel like they're putting their kids at risk. Um,
Yeah.
so I do think I so appreciate your experience in this, because there are not a lot of people who specialize in dogs that have aggressive behaviors like you do, um, and that handle it with such grace. So I'm really grateful that you talked to
Oh,
me about
thank you.
all of this, because I feel that anyone who listens to this will not come away feeling judged and will come away feeling empowered that management is awesome. That it's a
Yeah.
great strategy to set us up so that we can breathe. And then beyond that, we can take our time and make other decisions and take other actions to help our dogs be successful.
Yeah. There's lots of elements to the training process, regarding um, it, you know, um, I think it was Karen Pryor who said at a public event, and this is literally what changed my course in from like I want to work with aggressive dogs. She said or she wrote, it's just behavior. It's just behavior, right? Whether a dog jumps up on you to greet you or steals something off the counter or bites your neighbor, those are just actions. They're just actions, and they play by the exact same rules of any other behavior. There's an element of the environment that either cues it or sets the dog up to perform that behavior. The behavior occurs, and then there's a function of the behavior. There's something that drives the dog to be like, "Oh, that worked for me," and then to keep doing it again. So if we know that it follows the same rules of behavior, then yeah, bring your bring your behavior management to the table, bring your, functional assessment to figure out what the drivers are, bring your differential reinforcement, technical terms, teach the dog to do other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
teach the dog how to relax, teach the dog that I'm safe. And when kids are around, it's good news for me,
Yes.
right? Nobody's going to come pull my ear or ride me like a pony,
Oh,
but chicken may fall from the sky, you
yep.
know. Um, that's the hopeful part, that we can actually influence, um, you know, especially for a dog who kind of like, yeah, not a really serious, not a serious bite, pretty clear what's going on here. Everyone's on board, ready to work on this. Then we can actually get a lot of, a lot of good. It's amazing to see an animal change. It's amazing to see a human change, really, more than anything. But it's amazing to see a dog sort of like brighten up and go, oh, yo, little Teddy, that's cool. He's doing all right over there. I'm gonna hang out behind my gate, just watch you, but I'm okay with it now. Um, so there's hope. There's hope. There's
Mm-hmm.
always hope. We win more cases, you and I, than we lose.
We do. We really do. We win a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
again, just huge kudos to the parents that are brave enough and asking for the support that they need, because it's really easy to just
Mm-hmm.
suffer in silence, and reaching
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
has solutions. We will help you. All
Right.
right, Michael, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time. And next time we talk, it'll be over wine at a more appropriate wine o'clock hour, so that we can get into more nitty gritty just for fun.
Right. Right. Okay. All
All
right. Well,
right.
thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye
Talk to
bye.
you soon. Thank you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Pooch Parenting Podcast on iTunes or on the podcast app of your choice. If you're looking for ongoing support for your family with dogs, be sure to get on the waiting list for my Thriving Parents with Kids and Dogs membership at www.safekidsanddogs.com. And don't forget to follow Pooch Parenting on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks for listening.